Okay, welcome to the lesson, everybody. I'm just going to make sure that the camera is all set up well. Okay, I think that's good. Today we're looking at grammar. Just like last lesson, we looked at phrases and clauses. We covered adjectival phrases, noun phrases, and adverbial phrases. And today we're going to look at absolute phrases, which are slightly different from all three of those. They're not noun phrases. They're certainly not apositives. Although they are partially a noun phrase, and we'll look at that. They're not apositives, we're not renaming a noun. They're not adjectival phrases, we're not describing a noun. And they're not adverbial phrases that only modify a verb or an adjective or an adverb. They are adverbial, and they are at least partially a noun phrase, and we'll look at it right now. Now, I only came across these recently. Somebody asked on the comments in the last class about absolute phrases, and it was something that I hadn't actually looked at before. So I went online and I read a few websites. One of my favourite ones is called the Editor's Blog, although there were a few mistakes in that particular article on absolute phrases, and I mean mistakes in the sentences. But generally speaking, the Editor's Blog is a good blog, and there are many other good websites out there for absolute phrases too. There is Chomp Chomp, for example. Chomp Chomp's an excellent website, very straightforward, very clear, and I think it's aimed at American teenagers really, and so they do a really good job of making grammar very, very clear. So the absolute phrase, what is it and why is it important? Well, I suppose one reason why it's important is because it's always with commas, or let's say 99% of the time you see it with commas, and there's a very good reason for using commas. Now, hold on a second, I've forgotten my pens. Here they are. So there's a very good reason for using commas here, and it's because they modify absolute phrases. Let's talk about what it is. Yeah, what they are. What are absolute phrases? Well, they are noun phrases. Notice that we've got a noun, noun, noun. They are noun phrases, and what I mean is the head word is a noun. Okay, and they are noun phrases that modify the entire main clause. Now, if some of you remember what a sentence adverb is, you'll remember that sentence adverbs modify the entire main clause. Sentence adverbs are words like however, therefore, moreover, nevertheless. They modify the entire main clause, and you usually see them with a comma. Same for the absolute phrase. You usually see them with a comma, and they modify the entire main clause. However, they are not adverbs. They are either noun, well, they're always a noun and a modifier. Now, the modifier might be a prepositional phrase. It might be a participle. It's usually a participle, but it can be a prepositional phrase as well, because prepositional phrases can function as adjectives, and that's what they're doing here. If it's a noun and a prepositional phrase, the prepositional phrase is modifying the noun, so it's functioning as an adjective. And participles always function as adjectives. I think somebody asked in the last class, can participle phrases function as adverbs? Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I've concluded that no, they can only be used as adjectives. But I could be wrong, so be careful. But it seems to me that I can't think of an example where a participle phrase is acting as an adverb. However, noun phrases with participles can function adverbially, and then they're called absolute phrases. And we're going to look at some examples in a moment. But just a few rules first. So, number one, the sentence makes sense without them. Why? Because they're always next to a main clause. And so if you take off this bit, the main clause makes sense on its own. So the sentence always makes sense without the absolute phrase, okay? Secondly, they accompany a main clause. Well, that's just a reiteration of the first point, really. Thirdly, they don't have a conjunction. There's no conjunction there. There's no fanboys conjunction, and there's no subordinating conjunction, okay? Questions at the end, please, and about absolute phrases, please. If it's about a different topic, you'll have to find that video, that lesson, and put it under that lesson. Okay, so the sentence makes sense without them. They're next to a main clause. They don't have a conjunction. And number 4, most importantly, the head word is a noun. And I'm going to put a number 5 on here that I forgot to put earlier. The head word is a noun, and the noun must be with a modifier. Okay, it is noun plus modifier that makes absolute phrase. Now, what is a modifier? A modifier could be a few different things. It could be a participle, it could be a prepositional phrase, it could be an adjective. An adjective is a modifier as well. And that's why on one website I saw an interesting example of an absolute phrase that I would actually call an appositive. It was a wonderful cook. It had a wonderful cook was the example. Wonderful cook. And then there was a comma. Now you can see examples of this appositive on my video on appositives, but I didn't refer to them as absolute phrases because I didn't think they were absolute phrases. But this website pointed out that sometimes you can have an appositive that's modifying the entire main clause, and you have got a noun and you have got a modifier as well. So if you said a wonderful cook, comma, Sally baked all of the cakes in the oven for half an hour. Something like that could be considered an absolute phrase as well, although more specifically it's an appositive. Okay, so there are 3 different things we could have here, but this is not 3. There were 2 different things really, or 3 if we include adjectives, but participles are adjectives. They're just a verbal adjective, let's say, but you could have a noun plus participle, noun plus prepositional phrase, or noun plus adjective, like a wonderful cook. But quite often they are called appositives. And so whether there's a real difference between the 2, it's kind of up to you to decide. But the idea here is that you get noun and modifier and then the main clause. So even though it's a noun phrase, it's functioning adverbially in the same way that sentence adverbs function, exactly the same. So they are functioning adverbially, but they have a noun inside them as the head word. And this is why they are often called nominative absolutes. Nominative means noun, okay? Nominative means exactly that, it means noun. So they generally used for at least 2 different reasons. They answer the question why, how, where, when, like all adverbs. All adverbs answer the questions why, how, where, when. And so that means that they denote cause, and you could possibly just add the word since, because, when, and then you'd have a subordinating conjunction, a subordinating clause, a subordinate clause. You'd have a subordinate clause. You could always change these absolute phrases into subordinate clauses if you wanted to. Or they deal with manner. They deal with the how, where, and when, in which case you could rewrite them with the word with. Okay? Now in literature you do see a lot of these, just like you see a lot of participle phrases. You see so many of those in literature. Take any page of any book, you're bound to find some participle phrases. Like breaking the chair. No, that one doesn't quite work, being honest. Breaking the chair, comma, I stormed out of the office. Something like that would work. That would be a participle phrase. It's not an absolute phrase because that is acting adjectively. It's describing the subject in the main clause. Breaking the chair, comma, I, it's describing the I. But these act adverbially. And the head word is a noun. Breaking the chair. Chair is not the head word. Breaking is the head word. The participle is the head word. So participle phrases are adjectival. These are nominative absolutes. The head word is a noun. So have a look at these 4 examples that I found in Frankenstein, page 1. Just open Frankenstein if you've got it. It's a very common book. It's normally on everybody's bookshelves. There, Margaret, the sun is forever visible. Its broad disk skirting the horizon and diffusing the sky with a perpetual splendour, something like that. I can still remember the end of that sentence. But notice, this is the important part, because this is the absolute phrase. Here's the main clause. There, the sun is forever visible. That's a main clause, okay? Then you've got a comma, and then you've got your absolute phrase. Its broad disk. Disk is the head noun here. Sorry, try and use different colours to make it clearer. Disk is the head noun. Its broad disk skirting the horizon. Skirting is our participle describing the disc. What was the disc doing? It's skirting the horizon. And here we've just got a determiner, or an adjective if you prefer, and an adjective. Okay, so we just got possessive pronoun adjective describing the disc as well. So I hope you can see that the head noun is the disc. The head word is the noun. All the other words here are modifying disc. They're describing disc in some kind of way. But this is acting adverbially on the main clause, and that's why we need this comma here. Now, I've got to admit, I've made a mistake with this one in a few classes. I've just called this one adjectival and said, oh, it's describing the sun. But how can a noun describe another noun? So that was a bad answer, so I hold my hands up to that mistake. But I should have said that this is a noun phrase acting adverbially on the main clause. Now, this is easier to see on the next three examples, in my opinion. The next three examples are all from the book Lord of the Flies, which I use with a lot of my students at the moment when we're analysing punctuation. It's not very well punctuated, so perhaps I should find a different book, but it is on the syllabus. So because it's on the curriculum, the UK English curriculum, I use this book. It was even there when I was at school. I had to read this book as well. It's not one of my favourites. Now look at this sentence. Ralph stood, comma, one hand against a grey trunk. So here we've got the noun, which is the head word, and then we've got a prepositional phrase describing what the hand was doing. It was against a grey trunk. So that's acting adjectively, describing the hand. And this whole thing as a unit is an absolute phrase describing how Ralph stood. Yeah? It's describing how Ralph stood. Just like here, it was describing how the sun is forever visible. He was describing the North Pole, I believe, and how the sun is forever visible up there, as we all know, because of, you know, the solar system, blah, blah, blah. So this is acting adverbially as well, and this one is describing how Ralph stood. So you can't see me clearly, no? Unfortunately, it's a live class. It's not going to be as good as a non-live class. That's the way things go. Okay, C, Piggy was shouting something, comma, his face pleased, his glasses flashing. Now here you can really see he's got two absolute phrases. Both of them have got commas because absolute phrases always have commas, more or less. I very rarely see them without, and I think whenever you see them without, you could put a comma in there anyway. But notice that the noun is the head word. His face pleased, participle. His glasses flashing, participle. Yeah, so very often you find these absolute phrases with participles, which is why I've put that at the top. But notice that this is describing the how Piggy was shouting something. He was shouting something how? With his face pleased, with his glasses flashing. And that's why I wrote the word with here. You could rewrite all of these with its broad disc skirting the horizon, comma, the sun is forever visible. With one hand against a grey trunk, comma, Ralph stood. Yeah? Or his face pleased, comma, his glasses flashing, comma, Piggy was shouting something. So we could always add a with here with these ones that describe how, where and when. Okay? Same with D. He was a boy of 6 years, his clothes torn, comma, his face covered with fruit. Again, the head nouns are here, clothes and face. And again, it's describing the boy of 6 years old. So it's acting adverbially on that main clause. I hope everything there is clear. I was really quite fascinated by all of this information about absolute phrases, and it alerted me to a mistake I'd been making. I was really considering these as adjectival, and of course they're not. The head word is a noun. They can't be adjectives. They could be functioning adverbially, and that's what they're doing. And you can see some more examples here. His heart broken, or his heart being broken, if you want to use the passive participle. But his heart broken, comma, he pulled the trigger. Okay, I hope you can see here that these are, I'm coming on to the why now, the cause. We could rewrite this and say, because his heart was broken, comma, he pulled the trigger. Or since his heart was broken, comma, he pulled the trigger. And then we've got subclause, comma, main clause. Okay, so we could always change these absolute phrases into subordinate clauses with these words, or prepositional phrases with this with. So that's one which I just made up myself. And here's another one. Their hunger satiated, comma, they decided to leave the restaurant. So again, we've got a noun, just like we had the noun heart. And we've got a participle, satiated, just like we had the participle broken. And as you can see, they always have commas, and they always act adverbially on the main clause. So they are not adjectival, so I'm sorry about that mistake. If you watch some of my old videos on gerunds and participles, I very often confuse the two, so I'm sorry about that. They are different. If you watch some of the videos I've made about gerunds and participles, I correct some of those mistakes that I made. But the annoying thing about gerunds and participles is that in everyday English, we really do use them incorrectly. And everybody does it. And it even sounds wrong to use them correctly nowadays in a lot of situations. So there's a lot of confusion with gerunds and participles, but it's still good to get them clear in your head. And you will write much clearer sentences if you keep these kind of things in mind when you're writing essays, or even when you're speaking. It can even help your speech, a lot of this grammar. It can certainly clear up the kind of, it certainly corrects the kind of mistakes which often come out in speech. Okay, so that's all I've got to say about absolute phrases. This is a very difficult topic, and in my experience, looking online, I thought I came across quite a few adjectival phrases which were being considered absolute phrases, and in my opinion, that's wrong. That's different. Adjectival phrases describe a noun. Adverbial phrases, absolute phrases, and I'm tripping over my own microphone wire here, but adverbial phrases, absolute phrases, describe the whole main clause. So there is a big difference there. It's not always easy to see, but there is a big difference. Okay, I hope all of that is clear. Now, I'm planning on letting you know next time when I have a live class, because I'm going to try and do a few things. I'm going to try and be a bit less grumpy with my audience. I'm going to try to actually speak to my audience sometimes. I know that I don't do that. It's partly because I hate social media, even though I obviously have a YouTube channel. And so I'll try to be a little bit more communicative, a little bit more interactive. And I can tell you now that I plan on having a live lesson on Friday of this week. Don't know what date that is. Don't know what the date is today, being honest. I can quickly check. So it's the 12th today. It will be on Friday the 15th. On Friday the 15th at 10 a.m. UK time, I'm going to have another live class. So if people want to come along and ask me questions, that would be a great time to do so. Always ask questions at the end of the class. So questions now, guys. If anybody has questions, this is the time to write something and I'll do my best to answer. And 15th of March at 10 a.m. UK time, that's GMT, I'll come on for another live class. And I'll try to tell you in future, I'll put a post out or something like that on YouTube to try to warn you all about when the next live class is coming. I figure that might get me a few more subscribers and perhaps a little bit quicker. But it's not normally something that I'm worried about. I'm normally making these videos just for my students. And if other people like them, fantastic. But I work online, I work with lots of different types of students as well. And so I make these videos to help those guys because obviously they want to know, and it's easier for me to just explain it like this with my phone than to spend time in the class going through all of these intricacies. It's easier just if the student watches it for homework and then comes to the lesson prepared. That's the idea. So are there no questions about this very difficult topic, absolute phrases, or about participle phrases which come into it? No? Okay, well, thanks everybody for watching. Okay, there's one question. What's the difference between a reduced adverb clause and an absolute phrase? What do you mean by a reduced adverb clause? What does that mean? I can understand a reduced relative clause because that would be a relative clause missing the relative pronoun and the verb. But a reduced adverb clause, what does that mean? I'm not sure what that means. You'll have to explain to me or describe what a reduced adverb clause is. The absolute phrase is a noun phrase that works adverbially. That's the general idea. It's a noun phrase because the head word is a noun. It's very often got some modifiers like a participle, an adjective or a prepositional phrase, and it modifies the main clause. And that's why we call it adverbial. It's certainly functioning adverbially. Okay, so thanks everybody for watching. I hope to see you all soon. Okay, reducing adverbial means after playing video games. After is a subordinating conjunction or a preposition. Yeah, so if you say after playing, I would call that a subordinate clause. Okay, I'd call that a subordinate clause as well. I know that some books don't like you saying clause for that part because they want a subject and a verb. And that doesn't have a subject and a verb. It's just got after playing whatever or after doing this. I consider that subordinate. You could consider it a prepositional phrase even, because after and before are prepositions when they're followed by a noun. Now if you look at the verb as a gerund, after or before, then you've just got a prepositional phrase, but still it's incomplete, and so you'll have a comma before the main clause. Okay, if there are no other questions, I will see you all on Friday the 15th of March at 10 o'clock. Okay, thanks for watching. See you soon.